Hello, everyone. My name is Megan Ruoff. I'm a 2L at Penn State Dickinson Law, and I'm participating in the Manglona Lab for Gender and Economic Equity. For one of the lab's projects, Witnesses to Her Story, we are capturing the personal experiences of women in education, sports, and the workforce during a dynamic time period in the United States. Today, I have the privilege of interviewing a jack of all trades, a great grandmother, and an avid reader, Donna Ruoff. Thank you for joining me today.
Hello, Megan.
So, just to start off, when were you born?
I was born on November 13th, 1945,
And then where were you born?
in Greensburg, Westmoreland Hospital, that still exists.
And then who did you all grow up with? Who was in the household?
Who did I grow up with? And
Like, who was in the household when you were growing up?
when I was born, my father was in World War II. And obviously, I think I went home to my mother's maternal home. And then when he returned from the war, which was, I believe, I was probably about a year old when he returned, and we lived for a while with my maternal grandparents in their home. And I don't know if that went too well because very shortly we moved to my paternal grandparents um, and lived with them. And in that household would have been me, my mom and dad, my grandma, grandpap, and there might have been other cousins. I'm not sure, but that's like until I was two. And when I was two, my mom and dad bought a house, and the three of us moved to a little cottage in a little tiny town not too far away from either grandparents.
Do you know why that move from your maternal grandparents to paternal happened or no?
I would think in retrospect, when I look back at how volatile my grandparents, my maternal grandparents' relationship was, and how new my parents' relationship was, I would imagine there was a ton of stress. And it probably, and my paternal grandparents, they were more free. They were. I'm sure it was a better arrangement. I adored my grandfather. I supposedly, my family said I was the apple of his eye. I actually remember his funeral. I was two, and I sang a song in the old country language, Slovenian, and I can even sing it for you right now, in a rocking chair. And yeah, so he died when I was two, and then, like I said, my parents bought a little tiny house not too far away.
And was that still in Greensburg as well, or was it
Oh
out?
no, no, no. We Greensburg was like a big metropolis. We were in little villages. I mean, little towns. McCullough, it was a mining town. There was actually a mine right there, and then the other town, which was called Claridge, in Pennsylvania, was probably what a half a mile away. But in that time, that was considerably far. So, and then the little town that we moved into was just Harrison City, which is now a part of a thriving township in Pennsylvania.
Okay, and then you moved to Harrison City when it was just your mom, dad, and you?
Yeah. And then I was an only child until I was five when my sister was born. And we still were in that little house that my dad had literally added a bathroom, added a bedroom, and created a basement under the house. I mean, yeah. And that little house is still there, and it's as charming as it was that I remembered when I was little.
Okay. And then what job did your parents have?
Obviously, my mother had none. She was a housewife. My dad, when he got out of the war, ended up being a clerk at a local glass factory. Um, a town that was, again, about a mile away, was quite a hub for glassmaking, a decorative, industrial. and he worked for an industrial glass company, and he was in the union, and he was a clerk. Um, my mother, as I said, never worked, so she was at home and a housewife. I just heard a funny joke, and I have to share. Uh, in the women in the 50s, they had to worry about breakfast, lunch, and dinner and not getting beat. And I thought, oh my God, because that is truly what life was like for a lot of women back then. But anyway,
Okay. So, did you end up staying in Harrison City for the rest of your like younger life growing up?
that's a funny story too. My parents bought that house, and I know all the for $2,000 from a relative, this little cottage, and that was back in 1947. And then in 1950, my sister was born, who I cried when she was born because I wanted a baby brother, and she wasn't. But anyway, and then in 1953, my dad ventured out and bought a plot of land from a local farmer and was found a contractor, and he and my mom put a whole lot of sweat equity in the home, and they built a brand new brick uh, house on a what has now become a very busy road, and that was in 1953, and that big move would take me about 10 minutes to walk. It was also in Harrison City, but it just opened up a whole new area of Harrison City. And yeah, he built the house, and then I stayed in that house until I married. So anyway, that was Harrison City.
Okay. And then did you go through Harrison City for like public schools or did you?
Yeah, it was called Penn Joint School District. Have no idea where. Oh, it was Penn Joint. Jointure would have been short for joint was short for jointure. I don't know what we were joined with, but anyway, it was Penn Joint High School, and I went. Wonderful experience in school. I loved school. It was my total escape. I just all the new things that I learned and everything. It was what do I want to say? I was like a sponge. I loved it, and I walked to a local elementary school that still exists. In fact, it had been the administration building up until a few years ago, but there were four classes in there, and I went there first, second, third, and fourth, and then went to a little tiny school with two classrooms, and that was fifth grade, also in Penn Joint School District. And then I moved to in sixth grade. They brought a whole lot of other. There were six rooms of sixth graders in this building, and that was interesting to be around so many people, but and so many kids from different areas of of the township. And then that was sixth grade. Seventh grade, I went to another school. We all went there, and that was all of seventh grade. And then, believe it or not, when I was in seventh grade, we had to walk from our building, schoolhouse, just down a drive to the high school, which served as a junior senior high school in terms of today. And we actually, as seventh graders, had to walk for various, you know, I don't want to say extracurricular, not the major subjects, but maybe, I don't know, home ec or phys ed or whatever. But we had to make that walk. And then that was the school that I was in from eighth to 12th grade. And, uh, and again, we were, I always laugh and say we were a lot of big fish in a very long, little pond. And, but it was we didn't have any solar systems in the sky, and we just had a periodic table, but those teachers could really, really teach. And I loved them. I loved every teacher. I loved every subject, especially history. It was my escape, school, and I loved it.
So then what other subjects did you take while you were in school besides from history?
What other? Besides what?
History.
Oh, I loved history. I was quite good in math. However, girls weren't encouraged in math. I hated science. I absolutely hated it. I mean, scientific observation, I still don't quite understand. I didn't like science, but I got A's. And uh, what else did I have? Oh, English. English. We had grammar drummed into us from fifth grade on. I mean, subject, verb, diagramming, and I loved it. Um, Literature. When I was in 10th grade, there was a teacher, and she was quite modern, and the rest of the teachers were not quite modern, but she was modern and very progressive. And she introduced us to literature that I, as a sophomore, could watch GE College Ball, which was on TV on Sunday nights. And I knew most of the literature questions when college students didn't. That was how she was so aggressive. And I mean, Alexander Pope and Shakespeare and Lord Tennyson and you name it. We were introduced to a world of literature from that 10th grade teacher. She didn't last more than a year with our school district, and I would imagine a lot of kids had a lot of difficulty with her. And um, well, her standards were extremely high. If you wrote a paper on a book that you read, you'd get it back if she felt you didn't understand the book. And I can remember, oh my, I lied. It was my first lie that I, honest to God, remember. We had to read Dr. Zhivago, and I couldn't. And I don't know if I purchased the Cliff Notes or what, but I got through the test and got through, bluffed my way through. She didn't realize I hadn't read it. That summer, I made myself read Dr. Zhivago so that I could, in my heart of hearts, know I didn't lie to her. But what 10th grade class is forced to read Dr. Zhivago? Yeah, so she didn't last with the school district for more than a year. But I had wonderful experiences like that. I had history. They made it alive. It was just a great experience.
So with
Education, not socialization. Kids are pretty bad. They always have been, and they always will be. There will always be a bully in every class. So that was sort of difficult for me, socially. But you know, whatever.
so you described that English teacher as progressive. What did you mean by that?
I think she had curriculum, and like I said, I don't know that there were too many 10th grade classes anywhere reading Dr. Zhivago. Um, she drove an Austin Healey Sprite with the top down, and she was just right out of college, and she was she was different than the other teachers. I mean, they were certainly not going to go and add anything new to an approved curriculum. She did, and I loved it. But anyway, yeah.
And then I remember earlier you mentioned that women weren't really encouraged to go with math or explore math. What did you mean by that? Or do you want to explain more?
Um, oh gosh, what do I mean by that? Um, girls weren't encouraged truly to. Well, let's face it. You met with a guidance counselor, and if you were an academic student, which I was, you had an option. You could be a nurse or you could be a teacher. Nothing else. I mean, my dad kept saying, "You should be a mathematician. You should be a mathematician." I had no idea what that meant. All I know is I love math. I understood algebra. I loved algebra too. I loved geometry. Um, but we were not encouraged. I mean, it wasn't a possibility. I remember a fella and I represented our high school at various competitions with math, and they were just testing and senatorial scholarships and whatever. Uh, I know that he was encouraged to think of doctor, scientist, biochemist, anything. I mean, he was encouraged to do all of those things. Uh, I could be a teacher. And I did not want to be a nurse because looking at blood made my feet hurt. And I could not stand to be near a cut and had so few as I was growing up. Um, very stifled little girl upbringing, never get dirty, truly never get dirty. Um, we have your white shoes that are always polished. So yeah, it was just so different, just so different.
Did you want to do something in high school outside of teaching or being a nurse?
I because I think that I knew very early that the only option for me was teaching. And to me, teachers were like God. I mean, they truly were. I adored them. They were all females. And I knew I could fit in there. So when other kids were playing house, I was playing school. My sister had to sit at what and she had to listen to me teach her. And yeah, it was in my mind, I always was going to be a teacher. It was my only option. And I actually did become a teacher and hated it. It was like, this is the most boring thing in the world. And I was very, very surprised and very disappointed.
But you never got a chance to explore outside of teaching if that was the other subjects you're interested in?
When I was in school,
Yeah.
oh no, no, it was such a stifling period for women. I mean, I went to school where you had to wear a skirt. You could not wear slacks. Jeans were unheard of. I had one pair of jeans, and you wore that for a week, and God forbid you get it dirty. Uh, and we went to school with girdles on. I mean, can you imagine a girdle? I mean, we were not only stifled mentally, we were stifled physically. It was very strange. Sports. My dad was a natural. Uh, he had more natural athletic ability than anybody, and I know he was very frustrated that he had two daughters. And we both were taught how to throw a ball, bat a ball, drive a golf ball, play croquet, and beat everybody in the neighborhood. Um, and where was I going? I'm on a tangent, and I've lost that thought. Oh yeah, there wasn't even that opportunity for girls. I mean, there was no softball, there was no field hockey, and we had to. Oh God, I hated gym class. I would have done anything to get out of gym class. We had these hideous short dresses that we wore with bloomers underneath. And then you had to shower all together in this open. Oh, it was horrifying. Um, the whole thing about girls, people don't realize. I mean, people don't realize. It was just, you were stifled mentally, you were stifled physically, you were stifled emotionally. Um, yeah, it was, it was very difficult. My way out of that, I think, was teaching. I was going to be a teacher.
Were there any subjects that you always found that women would go to, men would go to, but there wouldn't be many crosses of them, if that question makes any sense?
You mean like did women go to more of the verbal things and the men go more to the science math? Is that what
Yeah,
you're
like were
talking
there like
about?
subjects or classes that a lot of women took that men were discouraged
Oh
from
God.
taking and vice versa?
Well, I think it was age old. There was the math and the science, and there was the English, writing, um, that, and obviously there were a few of us that excelled at both, but we didn't quite fit in. Even though we were in the same classes and we were all exposed to algebra and advanced, geometry. I didn't take trig calculus. I'd already been accepted for college and it wasn't required. And the math teacher actually cornered me and said, "You must take calculus and trig." And I went, "No, I don't. I've already accepted." And I didn't. And I wish I had, because it's one of the things that I feel I missed in my education. But anyway, um, I don't know how to answer that. We were together, but we were obviously, it didn't matter if I scored the highest on a test. It didn't matter. I wasn't going to be able to utilize those skills or abilities. Does that make, I mean, there was no option for us to be a doctor. You could be a nurse. If you were good in math and science, you could be a nurse. If you were good at everything else, you became a teacher. And if you didn't want those two, be a beautician and maybe a secretary. I mean, those were the options. And I graduated in the 60s, for God's sake. I mean, it's absurd. Yeah, but that's what it was.
Okay, and this is gonna be like a major switch of topics. I remember earlier you kind of talked about like the social aspects throughout school. Can
Yeah.
you maybe dive into that more a little bit?
Um, I'm going to try not to cry. Um, as I said, my family was pretty dysfunctional, and on the surface, we were the perfect family. Um, like I said, my schooling was an escape. The education, the books, everything was an escape. But socially, I had a very rough time. I was very popular, only female to be president of my entire class. Everybody after seventh grade, only men were officers of the class. But and I was in what I would call the elite. A lot of cliques, and but they tracked us. You were in section one, which were the academic students that accomplished and had good grades. Then there was section two, academic students that, C students. And then you went down from general to business to who knows what the guys that went to shop and what have you. So those were the six. We had six distinct, and you always stayed in that group. And out of that group, there were, smaller groups, subgroups, so to speak. And I was a part of the elite and, was very comfortable in it, started it maybe. And then all of a sudden, the elite group I was no longer a part of. Um, I was dating the um, the unattainable 6'2" guy in the class. When I was a freshman, I was asked to go to the prom by a senior class officer. Had to get special dispensation to go to the prom, and then I ended up not going. But I don't know if it was jealousy. I don't know if it was that I probably didn't have good social skills. My mother was very caustic and would say anything. I look back and think I probably was the same. Um, but all of a sudden, in eighth grade, we had this big thing. It was called the American Legion Award. And the American Legion Award was given to the outstanding girl and boy in the eighth grade. And I was dating this, the perfect fella at that point. And I can remember going to school, and I was hoping I would get the award. And it was for citizenship. I mean, it literally had 7 categories and all that stuff, and you had to vote. Everybody in the class had to vote for someone for citizenship, leadership, um, patriotism, behavior, all that stuff. And I remember going to school that day hoping that I would win. Um, but the rumors all around my class was that, oh, I would never win it, and da 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 da. And it was very nasty. Well, it ends up that the principal at a big assembly for the entire 8th through 12th grade made the announcement of the American Legion Award, and I did win. And the fellow that always went to me with the math class, he did win. And I remember the principal saying that never in the history of this American Legion Award did anybody win with such a large majority as we did. And I thought, wow, slapped it to them. No, slap me, because the next year they wouldn't even talk to me. And I was bullied, and I ended up, what do I always say? I ended up not fitting anywhere in any group. Ninth grade was very painful. um, my extracurricular activities sort of got me through it. I was in everything, and through extracurricular activities, I got very, very close friendship with a fellow that I ended up marrying. But we ended up in National Forensic League, going to tournaments from the time we were in 8th grade every Saturday of our lives. And he just became my rock and support that got through a very, very traumatic time for me. And so socially, and I still, I mean, I was in, gosh, name the extracurricular activity, I was in it. Name an officer, I was it. So I always did that, but that having a best friend was very difficult. And we didn't drive. I wasn't driving then, and it was socially, there were some mean kids, and it was a very, I don't know what I want to say. It was an innocent, yet a not so innocent kind of period. If that makes
You
any
said you'd
sense.
wind up meeting your husband through it?
Yes, yes,
Uh,
yeah, yeah. We ended up. I was president of my National Honor Society, graduating from high school, accepted for college when I was a junior, parents refusing to pay anything when I was a senior, and ended up graduating 2.5 months pregnant. So to that student, and with all the trauma with the family, because my family was constant behind the doors in some sort of uh, and trauma and drama. How about that? And with that, and then all the issues with really not quite fitting in. My self worth, I compartmentalized my life so very early, in that I would live and thrive on school and successes, and then be dealing with personal relationships, social relationships, fa- family issues, and it, yeah, my self worth at times was absolutely horrid. But anyway, yeah.
okay. And
And
then
then
you meant,
and
and
then
then
and I did, when I said I was 2.5 months pregnant. Then when I was like 3 or 3.5 months pregnant, we did marry, and both of us had to give up scholarships to school, and yeah, it was college, and it was a very, very rough time.
did people know you were pregnant before you got married?
That's odd. I, again, with my bizarre, um, extreme. desire to always be truthful and honest. I didn't hide it from anybody. I mean, I literally got married with just my grandma and grandpap and an aunt on my mother's side, and my aunt, my mother's younger sister, being my maid of honor. And I was very outspoken and very forward with all of them, and honestly said, "Well, I have to get married." And and I but at the same time, I was never so depressed in my life. I mean, I self worth felt like a failure. God, I'm going to cry. It was terrible. And my parents, that were so unaware of so many things, totally oblivious, didn't realize that I was having struggling so much with disappointing myself and disappointing my wonderful, wonderful teachers that were so hopeful for what kind of a wonderful teacher I'd be. Um, yeah, it was it was very it was a very difficult time.
Okay. And then how were you treated when people found out you were pregnant versus your eventual husband?
How did I really, I think I shouldn't say this, but I think a lot of people were quite glad that I sort of came up with my comeuppance. It was like she thought she was hot stuff, and all of a sudden now she's living with real. I mean, I've been told that we went to church and we were like this Hollywood couple, or not Hollywood family, the perfect mother, the perfect dad, these two daughters that were dressed to the hilts and groomed and clean and whatever. Uh, eh, when you have that kind of when you have that kind of expectation, there's a lot of jealousy with that too. And um, And I do know in my church there were a lot of people that were a lot of old biddies that were very, very, very nasty, but thrilled to death that my life sort of crumbled. 2 months to them after I graduated from high school. However, I did survive, much to the chagrin of those old biddies. But anyway,
Okay. But did you find maybe that like people in general in society treated you two differently on based on the circumstances?
at that point in time, I hate to say this, but I think a lot of women walked down the aisle in white being 2.5 months pregnant. It was very common. I mean, in that point in time, women, you found your mate in high school. You married your mate very quickly. And if you were pregnant 2 months before you got married, eh. If you were married 3 months after you got married, if you were pregnant 3 months after you got married, eh. It was just, that was our role. But it was such a disappointment to me. Yeah, and I struggled with it a long time. And obviously we married so young, and there were just, oh god, I you name the problem, we had it. Religion, finances, disappointment of not going to college, having children so quickly. I mean, I had 4 children under the age of 4, and I was 22.
So I just want to make you didn't go to college immediately after you graduated high school?
No, no, I no. However, I did all the papers for my husband, who was going to night school and working, and he started school. And oh God, I did every paper that he, you know, Castro and Fidel, and comparing J. Alfred Prufrock to uh, Captain Ahab from Moby Dick. Oh no, it was all Moby Dick and the Old Man and the Sea. That was it. I mean, I did all these things for him, and it gave me satisfaction. He'd get an A, but I wrote the A. It was really neat, and and it was odd. We were only married 10 years. In fact, it was 1 month short of 10 years that we were married, and it was after the divorce. We were in, well, marriage counseling, and then that didn't work, and we were in individual counseling. And it was recommended by my counselor at that point in time. She had a best friend that was, I don't know if he was running or if an administrator for the Bureau of Vocational Rehabilitation in the state of Pennsylvania. And she said, I would love for you to be tested by him and see if you would qualify for them to help you in any direction, to do something with my life. I was living with 4 kids alone, and and he actually traveled to Butler. I was living in Butler then with first my ex, and then after the divorce remained in Butler, which I was isolated from my family. That was a good hour, 10 minutes away, and I literally raised those. We were in a house in Butler with no phone, no car, and 4 kids. And when I had an appointment, like with my counselor, uh, my ex would bring the car over and I could go and what have you. But anyway, took the test, scored. He came back to the house and said, "Pick your college, pick your degree, it will be covered." So I literally had my college education paid for, including books from the state, which I never could have afforded otherwise. Raising 4 kids, I start. Oh, talk about self worth. When he said you could go anywhere, we'll pay for anything. And of course, Butler is only about an hour out of Pittsburgh, and I wanted to go to the University of Pittsburgh so badly. Um, I was terrified. Terrified. Didn't have a car to drive there. If I could get a car, I would be terrified to drive there. Um, and I ended up starting at the community college in January of '72. So I was, what? Instead of going to college at 18, I went at 27. And I started at the community college in January of '72, and then only went to the community college 2 semesters. Well, a semester, went to summer school at Slippery Rock, and then had another semester at community college, and then transferred all credits back to Slippery Rock and got my degree 2 years later. And I graduated in August of '74 with a degree. Um, I don't know. I don't know how I ended up saying with the 4 kids, college, work sometime part time. Um, I don't know how they ended up saying. It was a very, it was. I did it, and I consider it, my one of my greatest accomplishments. And I did it with not honors, because when you transfer credits in, they they just transfer in, not a doesn't affect your GPA. So my GPA, I was in dean's list, president's list, all that stuff at the community college, and then. But my overall GPA, when you looked at everything, was like 3.25 in 2.5 years with 4 kids. Yay! Yeah, yeah,
That's really impressive, yeah. And
yeah.
then kind of
And I became a teacher. But go ahead.
kind of backtracking before you went to college, what sort of jobs and things did you do when you were raising the 4 kids?
With a job that I did
Yeah, what sort of things did you do?
with 4 kids under the age of 4, and then growing up, I mean, I ran my own preschool. Um, no, I didn't do. I didn't work outside the home. However, that's not true. Oh boy. In 1967, remember I graduated in 63, already had my four kids. But in 1967, they I remember on the news the cost of raising a child was about $175,000 for 18 years. And I thought, I've got four. And Jim was actually, my ex, was employed rather well at that point in time. I wasn't working, and then I thought I need to start working, to do. And I had gone to a retail store. I mean, without a degree, without anything, and they gave the standard test. And of course, I took it and struggled to make sure I got everything right. And I was called back and told, you did get everything right. You, you got 100% on the test. We can't hire you because you would probably be too much of a perfectionist and would not get along. And then I did sell, oh God, what was it? There was a clothing company, a women's clothing company that you would do at home parties kind of thing. And I did that for, I don't know, 6 months or what have you. But other than that, there wasn't an opportunity. I mean, when you're not being hired by a retail store and you can't type and you can't teach, yeah, I again felt like a total failure, and self worth was going down the tube. But yeah, so yeah.
So then, what was it like raising four kids under the age of four when you're at home running your own preschool, per se? What was that like?
I didn't realize how I was a natural teacher until I had them. They're very bright, very. They were beautiful. They were beautiful, bright kids, and they really were. In fact, I had to test their IQs as one of my projects when I was going to college, and I was astounded at what their IQs were. Uh, my oldest son, very verbal, and I mean, his first "Mama, Dada," and "It's a ball," and I mean, it was a sentence. Uh, I, they were also different, and they were also bright, and um, I it was tough, but I liked it. I really did. I enjoyed them. I read to them. Bees the bus, the bouncing bus, the there's the shopper store. It's fun to sit in back of it, but seats are better forward. I mean, they knew that when they were 2 years old. Um, yeah, I guess I wanted to accomplish. I may have had four children and I may have looked like I was a failure, but I think I wanted the world to know these kids are so bright and so funny and so entertaining and so talented that I did something right. So I guess maybe what I look at as an idyllic kind of childhood for them, they might look at as, oh goodness, she's trying to make us perfect. But yeah, I enjoyed it. I really, really did. And I also enjoyed, in that point in time, I mean, when they got in early elementary and we were still in Butler and we were on the last city street in Butler. So there were all of these woods around. I mean, there were times when I had a big school bell and I'd ring it. I mean, that was when they knew to come in. They literally had a very free childhood. I mean, it was you didn't have to worry about kids being snatched or whatever. So they had that freedom. And Butler had a really unique um, downtown was really very nice and still is. And they had this unique thing where every intersection, all the lights would go off, all the traffic was stopped, and bells would ring, and everybody would just sort of cross. So it was very safe for an 8-year old or a 9-year old to go shopping on their own. and I allow them to do that. But yeah, I mean, I when oh, and we had quiet time, which they hated, but we had a half an hour quiet time. It was a very structured, we ate at this time, you napped at that time. I was literally running a preschool and didn't know it. So, but I enjoyed it. I enjoyed them. And I was so very proud of and I had them look perfect. I mean, I was raised by parents that wanted me to look perfect, so they looked perfect, they acted perfect, but they just were allowed the freedom that I wasn't. They were allowed the freedom to express themselves and be funny, and they were just four great kids, really and truly. And they grew up to be four great human beings. But anyway,
So then previously you mentioned you were approached by like this vocational group that kind of allowed you to go to college. Were there any other like factors in that decision that made you want to go back to college?
I knew that I was so poor at that point, and it was just horrible. And I knew that if I didn't do something to be able to support them, we would have a very, very, very different future. And I knew I had to. I knew I had to. I mean, I when you can't work retail and you can't be a secretary and you can't be a beautician, um, for me with my grades and intelligence, I there was just no other option for me, and I, I thank God that that opportunity was given to me. Yeah, and it was at a point in time too where socially, and I have a minor in psychology, a minor in sociology, and a BS in education. So, and I've always been a frustrated uh, sociologist, so to speak. So when I went to college, it was a very unique time of going. I mean, there I was, 10 years older than them, would walk into a class and it's like, oh God, there goes the curve. Because I did get good grades in college. So, she blew the curve. Oh boy, here she is. So I had that. But it also was during the Vietnam War, and drugs were just starting, and we had a whole lot of vets that were coming back out of stoners from the war. Um, I mean, if you were in Vietnam, you would have been a stoner too. That did come back and used the GI Bill to go to college, and that was God, the big abortion thing and burning the bras. And it was such a different time. So I'm sort of glad I didn't go straight from high school to college because that was still, you didn't go to the dining hall without, you had to have a skirt on. I mean, that was how college would have been had I gone right after. And then being that it was 10 years later, it was like I was in a different world almost. It was, yeah. When I look at how stifled, and girdles, I mean, no one. Bras, maybe. You know, it was God. I learned to smoke and drink coffee. College was wonderful.
And then did you go into college knowing I'm going to be a teacher? Nothing like this is what I'm doing?
No, no. I went into college and I didn't know enough about the opportunities in the field of mental health. Um, I was driven and I had such an interest in mental health because there were so many mental issues in the family and in my marriage and in all of the family interactions. And, when you live it, it's better than learning it. So I was living it. And my desire would always have been be a counselor of some sort, but I knew I didn't want to be a psychiatrist. that required a medical degree. Medical school, no way. Um, so I didn't know there was any other opportunity. And when I went to school, or when I got the, I had no idea what I wanted to be. And when I went to Slippery Rock, at that point in time, Slippery Rock, the head of the special education department was literally on the president's council for special education. And I went there and I thought, well, I don't know if I really have the patience to deal with uh, any kind of mental issue or learning disabilities, or there were three different classifications of special ed at that time. And there was emotionally maladjusted. And I thought, that's where I need to be, in education, emotionally maladjusted. So I had wonderful, wonderful advisors in college. I was so lucky. Even with my instructors, the profs were, I had maybe one bad prof, two at the most, and it was just wonderful. But anyway, I had gone, I was ready to, when you get through the general courses, and I had very few because I had transferred in like 52 credits. So I only had a few classes, and all of a sudden it's declare your major. So my major was going to be emotionally maladjusted special education. And there was a tea for us to all meet the staff and the administrators. And I literally thought, there is no way that I can be anywhere close to the pompous ass that was the head of the department. And I remember leaving that tea and crying. And I went to my advisor, and they let me in right away, took me in, and what's up? And I said, I can't be in that department. I know I will not fit in. And they were so, and they said, well, how about education? And then take as many psych and sociology courses that will give you somewhat of that feeling, but you'll still be in education. And it was a good recommendation, and that's what I did. I was advised to teach gifted secondary, and I went into, I didn't feel that, I didn't want to teach kids that I had felt inferior to. So I ended up, no, I'm going to do elementary. And very frankly, I think had I listened to that advisor, that college advisor, I probably would have thrived and loved the gifted program, and taught on a secondary level, and may have ended up teaching forever. But I, I taught for 2 years, and the principal kept coming in and saying, Donnie, you've got to start your master's. You've got to start your master's. And I said, as soon as I know what I want my master's in, I'll start it. And he said, well, you want to teach? Because I was a really good teacher. Um, and I just threw away all my evaluations. It was just ridiculous. Didn't realize how good I was. And I said, no, it's not going to be an education, Dan. It's not going to be an education. And then it was odd because serendipity or whatever. Um, my my ex and I had reconciled. We had divorced and we're back together. And he had been promoted, and we had to move again. And and when I moved, I was forced to obviously give up the job, the teaching job that I had. So all of a sudden, I made one of the toughest transitions that you can make from teaching into the private sector. And I did that. And that's what started my whole other schizophrenic career. I mean, truly. Yeah, I mean, I had so many different jobs, and then ended up where I was.
Okay, so I kind of want to backtrack towards your time in college specifically.
Okay,
What was kind of like the makeup of your program? Was it mainly women, men? Was it a mix, or what did you see?
it would have been mixed. Yeah, it would have been mixed. Yeah, it was a mixed program.
And did you find that women and men were treated differently in the program, or was everyone treated the same, getting the same education?
I think Slippery Rock is thriving today. In fact, in Pennsylvania, it's one of the it's thriving. They're doing a fantastic job, and I think they did then as well. Again, I would say my only feeling of being treated differently was the fact that I was older. I mean, I was a commuter as opposed to I was 10 years older, 9 years older. I related to some of the vets who were older as well. But it was a very turbulent time. Okay. That was when, for the first time, the schools were, um, what do they call them? Summer jams. They would go, they had to meet quotas as far as race quotas. And I think they were more focused at that point in time on equity between the blacks and whites. And I totally agreed with that. And women, we were, I don't, we were definitely a minority, but we weren't addressed as a minority yet. You know what I'm saying? And then I always, I mean, my life when you when you're working in 2.5 years to get a degree with 4 kids at home and working part time at one point to make money for the babysitter who's watching my youngest, um, it was I really didn't have time other than to just I was into my grades. I was into what I was being exposed to. Um, I enjoyed high school and absorbed like a sponge. When I went to college, I just blossomed. I mean, it was like there were so many new things and thoughts and theories and that I was introduced to. You know, it was really neat. And that was when women's lib, thanks to, I believe, my own personal opinion, Hugh Hefner. I mean, when he started the sexual revolution, that gave us our revolution as well. As women. I mean, it was a great time. I mean, yeah, I've gone from girdles to, women can now be anything. Well, that's not true. They'll never be anything. Not now in this environment, but
And then I know you said you commuted. How far was the drive from Butler to Slippery Rock? Or how long was the commute?
yeah, it took me, I want to say, I would give myself a half an hour so that I could, drive it. And I was a speed demon. I mean, everybody laughed that I got out of more tickets from cops than anybody. I mean, that was a hesitation stop. Trust me. I mean, I literally was stopped so many times. But I mean, when you had to get to class, and I would never be late, and then finding a parking place, and however far you had to walk, and yeah, it took about a half an hour. Yeah, and that is a very at that point in time that was a very snowy, cold area, and I hated driving, and now I drive anywhere. But and I was absolutely terrified of driving, in the snow. And funny story. Uh, I've got to tell this story. I was going to a community college at that point, and I had never seen freezing rain before, and I don't remember in my life, and that would have been in '72. Um, got the kids ready for school, and my one son was meticulous and always was the first one, and he went out, and we live on a very steep hill, and he walked out to the edge of the bushes, the hedges, and all of a sudden he just disappeared. And it's like, where did he go? And he crawled up the hill and into the house and up the steps, and it was a solid sheet of ice. And I'm like, okay, you can't walk to school. I'll drive you. So we get into my car, and I mean, we lived like on a ski slope, so I had to come down the ski slope. Why? Drove them to school, made it to the community college, hit and that was on a hill, and hit the parking lot. There was only two other cars in this enormous parking lot because we were all commuter students. And I hit the brakes and did several donuts and found out that someone came into the parking lot at that point, saw the donuts, and said, "Go home." They canceled class. No one was there, like three cars in this. So, I mean, that was quite an experience. That was a close drive. I mean, that was only like 15 minutes to the community college. But anyway, I
Okay.
digress. Tangent again. Sorry.
You're fine. And then so you graduated from Slippery Rock in what year again?
74, August of 74.
And then you said you went to teaching directly after?
Actually, I didn't student teach. I interviewed, one of the worst interviews I ever had, for an internship with the school district. And there were literally, was it six? There were principals. I mean, to give me an internship, and I did get it, and I was so lucky I got it. A stipend of I think $250, but help paid for the babysitter. Um, but I had to work their school term, not my college term, which means I started earlier and taught another month. So I was interning and still going to evening classes. And oh, that's a story too. I was approved for college graduate level courses evening and weekends so that I could graduate because I had a wonderful advisor in college. And I said, I can't go another semester for 3 credits. And she figured out a way. And so I had acquired some graduate credits from graduate school working on my undergrad. Um, what were you asking? I forgot.
I asked if you went directly into teaching or not.
Oh,
Your
yeah,
first bigger
yeah.
internship.
Okay, so where I interned, I didn't realize that the permanent teacher there was having health issues that I had taken that class over, and that was second grade. Well, I interned in kindergarten, sixth grade, and then second grade, and I was in second grade for probably two, two of the months, a long period of time, and I was in. It was in the summer. I was still working on my last semester, and in the window is the other second grade teacher who was working on, I don't know what accreditation she was working on at Slippery Rock at that point. But she's saying, come on out, come on out. I remember the instructor saying, would you go out and talk to her? And I did. And she said, you've got to apply. Um, the teacher in second grade that had the health issues was diagnosed with cancer and was going to be out a great deal of time. And she said, they want you to apply. They, our principal, want you to apply immediately. So I sent in, applied. I don't remember how, but I literally I had an interview again with three principals from a Butler school district, which was a big school. Almost the entire county was in our school district. And I remember I rushed home from class, pulled on my pantyhose. There's a run in one leg. I had two different pair of pantyhose on so that both would be. That was when mini skirts were in. So I didn't want runners. I washed my hair, couldn't get all this hair dried. My hair was wet in the back. And I literally went into that interview thinking, you've never been so disheveled. You're never going to get this. And I did go right, was hired and started in the same second grade class that I had interned in. So, and I was there for 2 years then.
Okay, so you stopped after 2 years. Why did you stop teaching?
My ex was promoted and we moved to Lancaster. And I was, I that was what caused. At that point in time, I knew I didn't want to be an elementary school teacher forever, but I had the opportunity then to, and I worked for the state. I was an intermittent intake interviewer for the state of Pennsylvania in the Bureau of Labor Relations, Bureau of Employment Law, or what I forget what it was called. It was the unemployment office that I was intake interviewer. So, and I got started that job, and would you believe the next week was called by Lancaster School District to sub, and I knew if I got my foot in the door as a sub, I'd get hired, if any, full time, but that didn't happen, and it just, as I said, it started my path away from education into business and industry.
And were you happy with that change?
At first I wasn't. I really thought, I especially when you get a call to sub the next week and you know that you could have still been a teacher. Um, but I again, I thrived at the unemployment office. I had a wonderful, wonderful female boss. She ran the office, the unemployment side. There was a man that did the employment side because we also did placement there as well. And and she had a very unique, when people don't understand what unemployment would have been then, but you literally had like 6 or 7 people that you would come up and fill out a claim, and then you'd come in every week and fill out paperwork and then ask you the questions and all of that. But you had to know your unemployment law while you were there dealing with the public. As soon as she knew you were comfortable and knew it all, she took you off the line and you were in support services. So I was taken off the line very quickly. And this is odd. We were the first. Trade readjustment allowance was a federal program where trade was impacting, like the steel industry, uh, public shirts, what have you. And we got the first claim for TRA from Bethlehem Steel that was affected by foreign imports. So she gave me, here's the law, interpret it, set up the program, and what have you. So I actually was the first person in Pennsylvania to administer, set up and implement and administer a trade readjustment program, and had to go to hearings when people would be fighting that they didn't get it, or why they didn't get approved, or what have you, or what have and it's odd because that supervisor ended up running from Harrisburg, our capital, running the unemployment operations for the entire state, and she was incredible. And prior to that, the training that was done in the state, I trained the guy from college, man, trained him on what I had done on TRA so he could then train for the state. So, yeah, that was my first, and all of a sudden, and it's odd because I how do I want to? I was always second fiddle to my ex. He was funny. He was outgoing. He consumed the air when he walked into a room, and it was all I could do to breathe. I was his second banana. I'd give him his straight line, and he'd come out with a joke. All of a sudden, I just discovered how funny I was. I mean, I didn't need him to make the jokes. I made the jokes, and it was a wonderful 3 years that I worked for Fran, the female. She was she was incredible, just incredible. Yeah, and then he got promoted again, and we moved again, and ended up at Head Start program where I was the administrative assistant, and I did all the meeting the federal guidelines, making sure, just doing all the administrative stuff. And I during that period of time we had a oh gosh, we were on the local news. We had people that were taken sick from our building, and we couldn't figure out why. And it actually was we had to meet fireproof requirements. We had drapes that were fireproofed, and everybody thought it was a chemical. So there I was dealing with professors from Einstein University and Dow Chemical and all this stuff to figure out what caused our environmental issue. And yeah, that was a neat experience too. I was only there for 1 year, but yeah, it was interesting. And that experience with the safety issue, didn't realize that was going to portend my future. But yeah, so that was interesting. And then I left my ex and moved back into the Pittsburgh area. Um, well, I didn't leave him; he left me. Um, and I knew I needed some support. And my kids were teenagers all at that point in time. We had always joked that once they were all teenagers, we were going to leave home. Well, he beat me to it. He left before I could, and but anyway, we moved back into the Pittsburgh area, and again, my life took a different uh, direction at that point in time.
Okay, so I kind of want to backtrack a little bit to your time in
Okay.
Lanc. I want to backtrack a little bit to your time in Lancaster. I know that you meant that you emphasized that your supervisor was a woman.
Mhm.
How did that impact your time there?
How did that impact my time there? Oh God, obviously she supported everything I said and did, which I loved. Um, but she was an enlightened supervisor. I mean, you talk about being fair. You talk about training people. You talk about just she had wonderful management skills, and she did not have a degree. I mean, she was straight out of high school, and she was one of my role models, truly. I mean, and she was fair. She was straightforward. Um, I mean, there were no kind of issues about minorities or whatever. However, that I worked in Lebanon, PA, and there was quite a Hispanic uh, element, and we had um, several Hispanic employees that were just so impressive, but they didn't get along with one another, which was very interesting. And Fran managed that. And I saw her, she was very talented. There's no other word for it. And she was very progressive. So I had a high school teacher that was very progressive and, right, intuitive and pushing and driven and all those wonderful things. And then fell in love with her. Also, when I was at Head Start, that was a female director, and she had an early childhood education from bank school, which was just invaluable, and she was quite a mentor. I mean, I was very, very, very lucky in that I either found father figures or mother figures or mentors everywhere I went, and I was very fortunate that way. But Fran and I can't remember her name from the Head Start. They were very impressive women. Very, very impressive women.
So then what year exactly was it that you left Lancaster?
Pardon me?
What year exactly was it that you moved away from Lancaster?
Lancaster, when did I move away from Lancaster? Let me, I lived in, believe it or not, 21 different places that I moved. Lancaster, we moved out in uh, 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 80, 1980. we moved out. No, out of Lancaster was seven. No, Lancaster was 79, and then Yorktown Heights in New York, where it was the Head Start program. That was 81 that I moved out.
Okay, so then moved to New York, and then once again, what did you do there?
After New York, when, like I said, my ex disappeared again, um, and I won't get into he disappeared again. But anyway, I knew I needed the support. I mean, there I was in New York, which was quite a haul from Yorktown Heights, which is right above White Plains, which is right above New York City, and from Western Pennsylvania. So I would have loved to have moved back to Lancaster because the kids thrived there and I loved it. Oh, it was just an experience. But I couldn't afford living in Lancaster. So I ended up moving back to Western Pennsylvania at that point in time on unemployment, thank God. And when you know how to teach unemployment, you can know how to use the system. So you know, I got furloughed for my job and ended up moving back to PA.
Um, where specifically did you move back to in Pennsylvania?
What specifically or where?
Where?
Where? Uh, in Penn Township.
Okay.
Yeah, in
And
Penn Township. I ended up renting the parsonage from the church that I had gone to when I was younger. And I was unemployed for, oh, probably a year. At that point in time, you could be unemployed for like a year and a half. So I was only unemployed for a year. And I ended up going to a resume service down in Pittsburgh. And that was quite what do I want to say? That was a challenge because I was actually going to the big city. And I loved that. And ended up managing a resume service and enjoyed that. That was I didn't realize I was selling over the phone when people would call in and ask about our service, and I would explain it to them and then set up an appointment for them. Um, I remember my boss, he was a man that owned the company, and how it evolved into a resume service. He placed accountants in it was the big eight at that point. So he placed accountants, and as part of his placement, they would need resumes, and he struggled to write them. And then their friends saw the resumes that he struggled to write and said, "Can you have him?" So he started that division, and then I ended up just a resume writer at first, and then ended up managing that. And I can remember him calling me in one day, and he said, "Do you realize that you have 100% of showing up?" And I'm like, "What are you talking about, Paul?" And he went, "You make appointments over the phone, and that usually means 50% of the people will show up and 50% won't." He said, "You have 100% showing up." And he said, "That's one hell of a salesman." Salesman? Me? So yeah. And I absolutely, because I was interviewing all these people, finding out about their background and researching all the different large resume companies, what they were doing. We were programming it, keeping it on file, updating. It was just a wonderful thing. And then the economy sort of tanked, and he had to close the business. And he said, "Will you buy the resume service from me?" And I went, "I have 4 kids. They're in high school, for God's sake, no." And I found myself unemployed again. So, but that was, again, schizophrenic. How do you go from school to head start, administrative assistant, unemployment, administration? And then
and then what years did everything in Pittsburgh take place? Like what time did you move back to the area in Penn Township specifically?
I moved back in 81 and I stayed there. Well, after the resume service, I had written a resume for a loan officer at our largest bank, and ended up writing resumes for his entire family. And he became just really very close to the to me, my kids, and all that stuff. And he, when I was unemployed from the resume service, and he pulled some strings, and I was going to be interviewed with a local insurance company. And I thought it was for an administrative position, so I interviewed, and lo and behold, it was for a sales position, an insurance salesman. And I was like, oh my God, I don't want to do this. So I had to take the test, and I did. And I deliberately tried to make it look like, don't hire me. And it was so odd because for once I outfoiled myself. It made, I wanted them to think that I was so desperate that I would steal money. And actually, they looked at it as, you're desperate, you're going to really want to make money. So I was hired, and I was with a local insurance company, and I worked there for 3 months, made tons of money. Um, I made the appointments, and my manager and I went out, and I schmoozed the wife and the kids, and he sold the insurance, and we were at 100%. And we literally were ranked. And it was a large insurance company, The Rock. Nationally, we were ranked. Our little district, his group. So I made a ton of money, and I hated it. And there was an advertisement for a local utility, a telephone company, for a communications consultant, and that was 1983. So I accomplished a whole lot from 80 to 83, being back in Pennsylvania, working 2 jobs already. But I applied, and that was at the point in time where deregulation hit the phone industry, and all of a sudden the phone company had other companies coming in selling equipment. And I didn't realize it, but I was being interviewed for a job to sell phone systems to small businesses and large businesses. And I interviewed, and got that job. And so I started with a um, local telephone company, which then became part of a very large telephone, independent, not Bell, but a large Fortune 500. And I worked as a communications consultant, selling phone systems then from 83 to 88.
So you were now working as a salesperson for a telephone company?
Oh, God. Yeah, I was. And I was very, very successful. And I did that from 83 to, I bought my first house at 87, in 87. And then in 88, our company had gotten so large that we were now part of like I said, the fourth largest telephone company in America, non-Bell, AT&T. And they had restructured, and there was now this Northeast region, and we were 4 states: Pennsylvania, West Virginia, uh, New York, and what's the other state? Good grief, Donna! But there were four states, and we were headquartered out of Jamestown, New York, which made no sense, but anyway. And a new regional manager uh, came in, and he wanted to do an employee survey. At that point in time, things were really changing. Uh, Discrimination, diversity, obviously women were in the phone company. There were a lot of female employees, so there were a lot of issues. So he did an employee survey, and it turned out that I guess everybody complained about no training, and so they decided at corp or at regional and corporate to establish uh, training programs in each region. So um, when I was interviewed during that employee survey thing, my thing was training, because the hiring process for that communications consultant job was the most structured, stringent, difficult, and yet very impressive hiring process. And I thought, wow, I really joined a great organization. And then after that, there was nothing. I mean, you went to a corporate training course on what products we offered, but that was it. And I said, you have to have better training. I mean, I dealt with the business customers who dealt with our business office, and these people did not, women, they were all women. They weren't trained to be customer service reps. We weren't trained to be salesmen. I didn't know about our linemen and all of our technical people, how they were trained, but we certainly weren't. So I had complained a whole lot about training, and lo and behold, I get a call from the regional headquarters saying, we're starting a training program or training department and would like you to interview for a training position. I had just bought my house. I'd only been there a year, and I thought, oh, well, yeah, I'll interview. What the heck? And I interviewed and was offered a job as the first management trainer for this region. And it required a move to New York, and it was like, oh my goodness. And I ended up taking the job and became the first management trainer for the Northeast region of the telephone company that I worked for. And I only did that for a year when I was promoted to the staff supervisor of safety and training. I was very comfortable in the training. Uh, it was a lot of, oh God, it was tough because I was not only doing management, customer service, but technical training. So I had to establish that staff, and then safety. I mean, I didn't know what OSHA stood for, and all of a sudden I'm in charge of it. So it was a learning curve that was unbelievable. But I did that for oh gosh, probably 2 or 3 years. I ended up with an audio visual department. Like I said, three different groups of trainers: management, customer service, and technical. And then I was promoted to manager of human resource development, which meant I was responsible from cradle to grave, so to speak. I was responsible for all of the hiring and the EEOC and making sure we were in compliance. And also, I was in charge of training for that group and all the promotions to make sure we met all of the guidelines, et cetera, company policy, and staying, of course, within federal guidelines about how we should be hiring. And of course, EEOC was quite a thing then. And I was also in charge of all firing and disciplinary process and salary administration, and then dealing with the unions. So that was quite all learning curves. Everything was a learning curve on that. I was all new. Yeah.
So backtracking a little bit, you mentioned how there were like a bunch of like issues arising with the kind of like how the workforce was changing with maybe like discrimination or that sort of thing. Can you please delve into that more?
Repeat the end of that question again, please.
Can you just delve into that and explain that a little bit more?
Oh, wow. Well, obviously, dealing with the unions has always been, it's very, very difficult. And computers had just, prime example. We literally had a grievance. I don't want to me, okay, it was so ironic that I ended up in the telephone industry because I still to this day feel telephones and electricity are magic. I mean, you know how it works, but it's like why? And so odd that I was thrown into that environment. Uh, but during that period of time, the computers were introduced, and I, being a management employee, wasn't allowed to touch a computer. So I had a secretary that two actually that were union. They could touch the computer. No big deal for me. I didn't want to touch the keyboard. Um, However, in our central offices, um, the switching equipment where all of the phones come in, calls come in and are sent out to elsewhere, that was all computerized at that point in time. And we had the union management issue in those COs. And a grievance was filed because a manager would come in the morning and hit a button and get a report of any kind of issues or problems during the night. And we were filed a grievance. They filed a grievance against that that supervisor or manager is touching the computer, and we literally had to go to arbitration and all that stuff over just that issue. So just that alone, I mean, every hiring, we had to be so careful on. And I was so what do I was I was born without a prejudiced bone in my body, and I had such empathy and sorrow for poor little black kids that I knew didn't have my little cottage with my swing and tree and grass, and there they were in the worst side of town, and it was just I was very much aware of it. So I was all for all of the equity programs and equal opportunities and all of that. So I knew that what I ran was not going to be in violation because I wouldn't have let it happen. Um, Women, oh gosh, this is a funny story. I didn't realize when I went in as a communications consultant that I was considered management. And I went to one of my first meetings of all the managers in this large conference room, all very impressive. And I mean, I dealt with the business customers. I mean, big PBXs, big ski resorts, and big companies with 1,000 employees. So, I mean, I heard all their complaints. So something came up in the meeting, and I actually spoke up and made a suggestion, and there was dead silence. Dead silence. It wasn't 2 minutes later that a man named Dan, I'll always remember him, made the same recommendation. And it was like, oh, Eureka, we have found it. Um, so I started out at the company with that kind of treatment as a female. You know, I was invisible. I left that meeting thinking, am I freaking chopped liver? I mean, what am I? I mean, this was so, it was so demeaning. And so, so I was there when it was a white man's company. And glass ceiling, did I chip it? Maybe. And I was very successful with this company. And oh, this is another interesting thing. You talk about the difference of male and female. Um, there were women, a few, that made it into the management ranks and were promoted. Most of our women were in union jobs that were customer service, operator, that kind of thing, secretary, all of the union jobs. Um, it was when I was the head of HRD, a human resource development, the new, oh, again, a visionary, wonderful, wonderful president was brought in from, um, I don't know, he went to the Jayhawk school. It doesn't matter. But anyway, from the Midwest, he came. And he wasn't there a week. And he came into my office and he said, I want you to do an analysis of the female employees in management, um, and make sure that they are being fairly compensated financially. And I went, oh, okay. Well, at that point in time, I was salary administration. It was a three-ring binder that you would go through and see evaluations. And we had a very structured, very well structured salary program where jobs were evaluated in levels, and that level had a range of salary, and there was a starting point, midpoint, and when you maxed out in that range. Well, every year the ranges moved up 3%, so that if you were even not being promoted, but in that same job forever, you would always get a 3, 4, 2% increase as the whole range shifted. So he said, I want an analysis done of all the female management employees. And I had to do it manually. I mean, I had no computer, no spreadsheet. And so I did it, and it was quite fascinating in that women were invariably paid less in every category. And some of them were absolutely egregious what they were being paid in comparison to their male counterpart. So he came in after I don't know how many weeks I was given to do this project, and on top of everything else. And he came in and he said, "Well, what'd you find out?" And I said, "Well, we've got some issues. We have some issues that you're going to have to make some hard decisions about. Um, how much do you want to make this a fair compensation program?" And he went, "Well, who's been treated the most unfairly?" And I sat back and I said, "You won't believe this, but me." And he started laughing, and I had really gotten all kind of awards and stuff, and I was making a lot of increases I was very pleased with. But I didn't realize that at my level, I was like the lowest paid, had the highest evaluations, and was nowhere near my midpoint. And he went, "Oh my God," And that I was the worst case scenario, but every other case was pretty bad. And he actually had the integrity, true integrity, to let's correct this. And I had to come up with a plan on how we could get our women back up to where they should be, how we could work it with our payroll system where we couldn't give a $10,000 raise because it would flag it. So we had to come up with a way to fairly compensate the women. And it was so odd because I mean, like in a matter of 3 months, I don't know, it was like over $10,000 that I was given, and at that point in time, that was a lot of money. But yeah, so there, he tried to correct that. I know that that did not go on in all the other regions. He was so, as I said, uh, a lot of integrity, and he valued women. I even asked him once, you know, you are so pro female. Why? And he said, when you have somebody that is as educated, as bright, as perceptive, and intuitive, women are perceptive and intuitive. He said, why not utilize it? And I thought, yes, why not utilize it? And then they closed our region. I mean, that was when everybody was downsizing and restructuring and all of this because of the turmoil in business. And so 250 people that I was responsible for hiring lost their jobs in one day. And 60 of us were offered other jobs with the company. And I was one of them. And I went to a startup, uh, wholly owned subsidiary startup with this phone company. And I had to move to Ohio for that. And I went there as the head of training. And within 3 months was manager of human resources. And very frankly, I had the building, purchasing, safety, hiring, the whole gamut with HR. Had I been a man, that title would have been vice president of operations. But I was a female, and I became manager of human resources. So that was where and that was from '93 uh, until they closed my department in 2003. So that's when my whole department was dissolved due to consolidations.
So you moved to, I just want to make clear, you moved to Ohio in 93 and worked there until 2003?
What did you say again, Megan? I didn't.
I just want to make clear, so you moved to Ohio in 1993 and stayed
Yes.
there till 2003? Okay.
Yeah. 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 And that's where I started working on my master's. Um, I was 50. Um, and I did it with, we had a good reimbursement program for college. And I went in community counseling with an emphasis on organizational development because our wholly owned subsidiary did not have the benefits that the other parts of the company had. Um, a retirement program, a deferred retirement program, which was just sacred to the telephone industry. We didn't have. We had the opportunity to grow our own wealth by contributing to a 401k. Um, so we had that, and there were other issues. We had an excellent short-term, long-term disability, uh, but I had I had to come up with unique ways to, and it was organizational development, to come up with ways that would keep our employees working for us. And when I started with that subsidiary, there were 13, I was the 20th employee. And when I ended, we were over 500 strong. And we had, good God, 6 different locations. One was Alaska. And so it was very interesting. But I started, like I said, my master's program at Kent State in community counseling with a concentration in organizational development. Yeah, yeah, and I
How
love.
how popular was that program at Kent State?
How popular?
Yeah.
Very, very. Although I think I was the only student there that was paying, most of them were parents working for the college and what have you. And it was it was a good program. It truly, truly was. I I had been encouraged by most of my professors when I was at Slippery Rock uh, to enter counseling of some sort. I was offered a graduate assistantship in community counseling and turned it down to take the teaching job for the money. I mean, $400 a month as opposed to a teacher's salary. I did take the teacher's salary. Um, but it was very racially, it was mixed. Race, sex wise, it was very equal. Um, I always thought, though, that if these kids, and I'm going to say kids because most of them were in their late mid 20s, I was 50. And again, walked into a class and here she comes. She's going to blow the curve. Um, I wouldn't have had them train my dogs or counseling my dogs. They were, I mean, most of the girls, the worst trauma that they had dealt with in their life was a bad hair day. And I thought, how do they have the empathy and where is their depth to truly counsel people? I mean, my counselors, and I had many of them throughout my life with family counseling, individual counseling, marital counseling, they were my lifelines. I mean, I wouldn't have survived my life without them. And I thought, that's how important you're going to be in someone's life. And you have not an iota of what hardship is like. And I used to watch them all and think, God, I hope they don't ever counsel any of my family. I really mean that. And I also was so thrilled that I was actually in uh, higher education is great, but so much of it does not apply to what you are doing or what you are going to do. And then and then all of a sudden you get into master's programs where, yes, you are learning your content, you're learning your subject matter, you're learning. I mean, my first course, we were literally on tape evaluating every question, every word. You didn't reflect correctly. You didn't answer this that was not an open ended, that was a yes or no direct question. Don't do that. I mean, it was practical learning. So, and you all saw everybody else's sessions. So you knew who was a natural and who wasn't. And there were a lot of people that were not natural, and there wasn't any way they were going to come out, I don't feel, as as effective counselors. But anyway, and that was age discrimination because I literally worked for. I went. I finished 20 credits in 1 year. Was invited to the national honorary counselors, whatever, because my grades were so good. Um, and why that program was in the School of Education, I'll never understand. But there was one instructor, one professor from the School of Education that we had to take. It was a required course. And I don't even remember what the topic was of that course, but she literally, it was the worst instructor, teacher, trainer I had ever seen in my entire life. And she literally had an attendance policy. And if you missed one class, you were down to a B. And of course, in our program, if you got anything lower than a B, you were kicked out. And if you missed two or three classes, you were automatically a C. Well, that year, that course, I had planned a trip to Europe with several members from my family, and I was not going to cancel a trip to Europe. So I knew I was going to miss one class. And it turned out it was when I was taking her ridiculous course that I still have no idea what it was about. And she made it so difficult. It was horrid. And so I knew I was going to miss one. And I thought, gee whiz, I'm going to get a B, my first B. And then corporate came up with an emergency meeting that we all had to fly to Little Rock for. So that was two. So I knew I was already down to a B or a C. I figured I could talk her into a B. And when I got back from Europe, because I had the corporate meeting, then I went to Europe, came back and got pneumonia for the second time. And I remember, I wish I had this phone on tape because I would own Kent State at this point. Because she literally, when I said, I'm so sorry, but I have pneumonia, I would be in the hospital if my insurance covered it. Um, but I can't, I don't know how many classes I'm going to miss. And she literally said, at your age, you need to just stay home and try to get better. And I was devastated. Um, I didn't go back. I didn't finish that semester. It is the only thing in my life that I have not finished. And it was because of that totally arrogant, incompetent, insecure woman that taught. And the only reason she was thrown into our curriculum was she was a part of the School of Education, and I don't know what her ego trip was, but yeah, because of my age, she advised me to just not worry about school, stay home and get better. And I was, like I said, devastated. And so I didn't finish my master's, and I feel very bad about that.
So what did you end up doing after that?
After that, I continued being, oh, and it was so odd because most of them wanted to be HR managers, the people in my course. And it's like, I didn't want to be an HR manager. I wanted to be a counselor. And, um, and I went back to being an HR manager. And when I dropped out of uh, grad school, I was admitted in 97 and I dropped out in 98. And then in 99, I had some very, very big health issues. And then, very frankly, if I hadn't had such a competent, wonderful staff, because I basically just managed and trained and dealt with, well, EEOC complaints and dealt with disciplinary issues and firing people. It was the official fire for the organization. Um, but then they, like I said, the reorganization of the whole company came in 2003, and my department was dissolved. So everything that all the HR that they needed, any function, um, that was still left in our division was handled through a central HR group. Hit one for firing, hit two for benefits, hit three for, it was absurd, but that is what happened. And so I and a whole lot of people were ushered out. And I was not prepared at all for retirement. But at that point in time, I can remember my nephrologist had said there isn't a way that you could literally interview and tell somebody that you could work 40 hours a week because you don't know when you're going to be capable of working or not, because I was, it was pretty debilitating. And so I thought, well, I'm not in my plans, but I'm going to be retired. So I retired very early at 23, and not it went at 2003.
Okay, that was my question. So you
Yeah.
retired in 2003, and then
Pardon.
anything? So you retired in 2003. Did anything else like happen after that greatly impacted you?
My health deteriorated. Hmm. I lived in Ohio and I had no relatives, no family around. And my daughter was the closest to me, and she lived in Pennsylvania. And I was constantly having tests and procedures done and what have you. And she would travel, to come, and it was a 2 hour travel, to get there. So she would make the trip and go to whatever biopsy or whatever it was. And I called her and said, would you believe I have cataracts? I've got to have cataract surgery. And she didn't make a comment. And this was in like 2010 at that point. I had lived there 7 years on my own without a job and with my dog. And excuse me. And when she didn't make an offer of, well, when you're going to schedule it or I'll be out or whatever, I thought, I've used up that source. And I knew I had to move. So I made my final move back to Western Pennsylvania to have a little bit of a support system. So that's, and that's been my life ever since. And it's been very, very, I've enjoyed retirement. Um, as I tell everybody, I have had to read so many I mean, my career literally changed in so many different directions and thrown new subject matter that I wasn't an expert and had to immediately become. So you're reading all the professional journals and all the everything that you can get your hands on to get yourself up to par. And I promised everybody, myself especially, I will not read a professional thing again, but I'm still an avid reader. I love my trash books. I love it. Um, Frustrated actress, loved movies and TV. Um, love my puzzles. Um, and I have a wonderful, wonderful my family. I have four wonderful adult children and 10 wonderful grandchildren and four or six great grandchildren, and I'm very proud of all of them. They're they're quite accomplished, and I'm very proud of them. And I love the fact that my genes are in them somewhere.
Okay, so sort of wrapping up, we started this interview by describing you as kind of like a jack of all trades, a great grandmother, and an avid reader. How would you describe yourself?
Schizophrenic? uh, no. Um, how would I describe myself? Uh, an overachiever, um, a failure. I feel that our purpose on life was to have a meaningful relationship with somebody, um, which I did not have, and was too terrified of all the trauma and disappointment and self worth issues that I would never want to pursue that kind of relationship again. Um, that was a failure. I feel very, very. My child rearing, I know, was basically don't do anything that they did with you, do it differently. I'm sure my kids are thinking, don't do anything the way she did it, do it differently. But I'm very proud of the fact. I think I was a good mom. We had family powwows, um, so I was a good mom. I I I I do miss the the nuclear family, our nuclear family. We might be nuclear, but we're all separated by states, you know, and that physical separation is very difficult. Um, I think I'm smart. Um, and right now I'm very frustrated being old. I'm going to be 80 very shortly, and old age, and I don't mind getting old, but it's different because in my life I've had so many obstacles and I've had so many counselors that have given me suggestions and ways to work out the problem and go forward. But it's all you doing it. And I became quite good at coming up with strategies so that I could get over a particular problem. And there were a lot of them. And when you get older, you don't have that power. You don't have that control. I mean, you're limited by physically. You're limited physically, basically, financially. Um, I'm very political. I'm very religious, but I don't know if I believe in. I'm Episcopalian, but I don't know if I truly believe in organized religion. But I feel that I'm very God fearing because I've always had a very close relationship to a supreme being. He raised me. What would I? How else would I describe myself? I hope I'm somewhat loving. I've been told that I have a knack of bringing out people's talents and making them feel better. Um, but I miss the closeness of you know my grandchildren and my great grandchildren. I really do. So other than that, is that a description of me? I've lived a wonderful life though, a wonderful ordinary life because I've been there when, like I said, women were in girdles and horribly uncomfortable bras. I've seen the evolution of civil rights. I've seen the evolution of technology. I've seen a man on the moon, which didn't affect me at all because I science. Yeah. So what am I? I'm still an avid reader. I love my. I worry that I will still be very lucid and aware when my body starts really. I'm wondering which should go first, my brain, because my mother died from Alzheimer's dementia, and um, and I always looked at her and thought, oh my God, she's not lost her life, she's lost herself. Um, and I always felt so sorry for her. But then I thought, well, gee whiz, she was so oblivious to what was happening. I'm very aware, and it's like, ugh, I wonder if that's more advantageous than, my brain going. But yeah, I still feel I can debate with the best of them. I love it. So yeah, and I'm very proud. I'm very proud of my when my whole family gets together, I am absolutely in heaven. I mean, that's whatever.
And
So I
then
guess I turned out exactly what the 1950s wanted me to be, a wife and a mother. A wife and a mother. So
looking back on all that you've experienced and achieved, what makes you most proud of your younger self?
proud of my younger self or proud of myself?
Proud of your younger self.
I didn't realize it at the time, but I'm very proud of the fact that I could compartmentalize so much because I was so aware of so many things at such a young age. And you don't have the power to change anything at a young age. So you compartmentalize what's going on at home, and you compartmentalize what you're doing at school, and you compartmentalize your social. Um, I'm very proud of that. I learned to do that. Um, I'm proud of the fact that I loved learning. Um, I made a concerted effort. I decided to be cultured. I needed to know art. I spent an entire summer studying art in the encyclopedia. I mean, I can tell you right now who's a Matisse and who's a. I mean, it was that. I'm very proud of that part of me. Okay, I I I wish my life had been easier. I wish I had gone straight to college, but yet I would have missed that wonderful experience of all the changes that society was we were going through when I went to college in the 70s as opposed to the 60s. So I wouldn't want to change that. I would have loved um, to have picked a life partner that would have been a life partner. um, that's been a failure. That's a failure, and I feel much of a failure. But I think that was, the fact that I overcame being just a plastic Barbie doll because I was raised to be a Barbie doll, look like Barbie, get married like Barbie. Um, that's what I was. Well, Barbie came after me, but I I often said I was a Cabbage Patch Kid, and I would not have wanted to raise me if I were my parents. They weren't equipped to raise me, and I know that. And and I survived it. I survived. Glory Gaynor. I will survive, and I have, and I will. So that's anything else.
No, so as we close our interview, I just want to thank you for sharing your story with me and the audience. It was a pleasure to hear your story, and I'm excited about the impact your story will have. And I just want to thank you for joining me today.
Well, and I hope that no women will become as schizophrenic as I. And I use that, I'm joking. I'm not at all schizophrenic. My career has been, it's been a pleasure. I'm not as, what do I say, impressive as other women, but I know that, and I've lived an ordinary life, but it's been a good one. I mean, what I've seen, yeah, it's been good. And I hope that women, oh God, I hope women survive where uh, what we may have coming in our future now. And I'm surprised you didn't ask me about abortion. I'm sorry. But anyway, hey, well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye bye.